always a pleasure and an honor to have on the program with us Congressman Alan Grayson, so brilliantly representing the 9th District of Florida. Congressman with guts.com, tradetreachery.com, grayson.house.gov. Congressman, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Tom.
I'm not sure what your most recent website is, but you're saying seniors deserve a raise. Tell me about this.
Well, sure. I realized a couple of months ago that because of the cost of living adjustments that had occurred during the course of the year, there was a real risk that seniors would not get any cost of living adjustment at all under the Social Security COLA provisions. And that seemed unfair to me. I realized that a big part of the reason why the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, was not showing substantial increases was because the cost of gas had gone down. But I know that many seniors don't commute to work, and in fact, a lot of seniors don't even drive, so that didn't benefit them at all. I got in touch with the Congressional Research Service, the service that we use here in Capitol Hill, to find facts for us and issue reports. And I asked them what actually has happened to the cost of living for seniors. They told me that it's gone up by 3% in ways that haven't been allowed for by the CPI, the Consumer Price Index for workers. That's how we actually, by law, determine what the COLA is going to be for seniors. It's odd that we look to a Consumer Price Index for workers to determine for seniors what their cost of living adjustment should be, but that's the way it was set up 40 years ago, and nobody's done anything about it to fix it.
Right.
So I drafted a one-page bill called the Seniors Deserve a Raise Act, and I took the CPI figure that was provided by the Congressional Research Service. The bill would institute a 3% increase in Social Security benefits instead of the 0% cost of living adjustment that they received this year, and also change it in the future so that the cost of living adjustment is based upon the cost of living for seniors, not the cost of living for workers. And the idea obviously has a lot of appeal. We got over 50 co-sponsors for the bill before we even introduced it. There are over 50 original co-sponsors for the bill.
That's marvelous. You know, Senator Sanders has been talking about that sort of thing for years. Do you have colleagues in the Senate who are going to drop a similar piece of legislation?
Yes, I think that from time to time we've seen legislation like this, but it usually is either one or the other. This is not the first time when the cost of living adjustment failed to reflect actual cost of living for seniors. So when we had this happen back in 2009, there were some bills that were introduced back then to give seniors a cost of living adjustment, and one of them actually passed. There was a small cost of living adjustment that went beyond the one that was prescribed for workers.
That was when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, though.
That is correct.
Once the Republicans took over, that was...
So we were fair back then.
Yeah.
And that's the only time that's happened. Also, there have been bills over the years that have been introduced, the one by Mike Honda, for instance, that would change the way that the cost of living increase is adjusted so that it reflects the cost of living for seniors. There have been bills like that. But this is the first bill that I'm aware of that brings those two things together and takes care of the immediate problem we have, which is that seniors deserve a raise right now.
Yeah, amen. And that the cost of living adjustments that are calculated for seniors for Social Security really need to be based on seniors' lifestyle rather than a more general American lifestyle. Because as you point out, there's gasoline. The other thing, my understanding is that another thing that really suppresses the probability of a rise in the cost of living is how technology is advancing. It's, computers are getting more powerful and less expensive, with every iteration. And, maybe younger people are buying a new computer every 2 years or a new phone every year or every other year or every third year. But, typically people who are retired are not. And so they're not seeing the benefit of that. Is that a consideration of yours?
Yes, the whole basket has to be changed if you're going to look at how seniors actually spend the money. And in fact, the government already does that. We just don't use the information. There's something called the CPIE, the Consumer Price Index for the Elderly, which accurately calculates this. We've been instead using the CPIW, the Consumer Price Index for workers, in part because the CPI didn't exist back in 1975, but that was 40 years ago. What's the excuse today? It doesn't make any sense that we're using the wrong index after all this time, but it's exactly the way you say. Seniors, as indicated before, spend less on gasoline. The real price of gasoline actually peaked in the 1980s, and the real price has been going down ever since then. Seniors spend less on gasoline. They spend less on the kind of things that you mentioned, the high-tech things that are more attractive to a younger generation in many cases. They spend less on clothing. They spend more on health care, substantially more on health care, even though they're covered in most cases by Medicare.
Right.
They spend twice as much as younger people do on their health care. And if you're talking about seniors who are 70 years old or older, they spend 3 times as much.
The other thing,
that's an area where the prices have been increasing over the past few decades very significantly.
Yeah. The other thing that shocked me that I discovered when my own mother was dying was that if you take Medicaid money for particularly for people who have things like Alzheimer's or whatever, for housing, for what would you call that? Assisted living. After the person dies, the federal government comes in and says, if there's any money in the estate, you've got to pay us back all our expenses. It's like you've got to basically bankrupt yourself. It's the last theft of what you have if you're in the middle class. Is there any effort by anybody to do anything about that?
Well, yes, there have been efforts over the years, but there's a countervailing consideration, which is that essentially you don't want millionaires benefiting from Medicaid.
Yeah, but my mom.
So what has happened is there's been a whole area of the law that's been established to advise seniors in this situation. It's basically trusts and estates for the living.
Yeah,
is what it comes down to, explaining what you can and cannot do. But you're right. I mean, to qualify and get the care that seniors sometimes need, or younger people sometimes need, often involves impoverishing yourself in one form or another. And if you don't do that, and you end up paying full fare for medical services, you often end up in bankruptcy anyway.
Right. Yeah. It's just not a reasonable thing.